The revolution of self love, how radical acceptance transforms mental health. Have you ever noticed how we're taught to love everyone else first? How we're conditioned to pour from empty cups and call it strength? How we celebrate martyrdom while stigmatizing self care? I had the extraordinary privilege of interviewing Sabrina Northern recently, a visionary whose work in mental wellness has transformed countless lives across communities of color. What struck me most about Sabrina wasn't just her impressive credentials or the groundbreaking programs she's developed, it was her unwavering commitment to a truth so many of us have forgotten, that self love isn't selfish, it's survival. Sabrina Northern isn't just another wellness expert. She's revolutionary who has dedicated her life to dismantling the harmful narratives that keep marginalized communities from seeking help. Her research has been cited in over 40 academic journals. Her community programs have reached more than 100,000 people, and her approach to culturally responsive mental health care is literally changing how institutions approach wellness. But her greatest achievement, teaching people to come home to themselves. The most revolutionary act, Sabrina told me, leaning forward with quiet intensity, is to love yourself unapologetically in a world that profits from your self doubt. Those words lingered with me for days. Because here's what Sabrina Northern understands that many of us are still learning when we talk about mental health, especially for Black women and communities of color. We're not just talking about managing symptoms, we're talking about reclaiming our fundamental right to wholeness in spaces that weren't designed for our healing. The statistics are sobering. More than 1 in 8 people globally live with some form of mental disorder. Among Gen Z, anxiety rates have skyrocketed to 42%. During the pandemic, suicide risk among young women rose by a staggering 50%. These aren't just numbers, they're neighbors, sisters, friends, perhaps even you. But what happens when we add the layer of cultural stigma? What happens when seeking help is viewed as weakness? What happens when strength becomes a prison rather than a virtue? This is where Sabrina Northern's insights become revolutionary. Through her extensive work, she's demonstrated that self love isn't just a hashtag or a luxury, it's the foundation upon which all mental wellness must be built. Let me share something that happened during one of Sabrina's community workshops. A young Black professional stood up, voice shaking slightly, and said, I've spent my entire life being the strong one, the one who holds it together, the one who never breaks, and I'm exhausted. The room fell silent, not because her admission was shocking, but because nearly everyone recognized themselves in her words. This moment perfectly captures what Sabrina Northern calls the superwoman syndrome, this idea that vulnerability is weakness, that needing help is failing, that our worth is measured by how much we can endure without complaint. But what if we've been getting it all wrong? What if strength isn't about how much you can carry, but knowing when to set things down? What if healing begins not with pushing through, but with permission to pause? These are the questions Sabrina Northern's work invites us to consider. And the answers, well, they're transforming lives. Consider the story of a group of Black Gen Z professionals who found themselves drowning in anxiety after the pandemic. They faced a perfect storm: academic pressure, career uncertainty, and the relentless comparison trap of social media. Many had grown up internalizing the message that vulnerability was weakness, a cultural inheritance that left them suffering in silence. But then something shifted. Through a program, Inspired by Sabrina Northern's approach, they began practicing daily affirmations rooted in self love. They set boundaries around social media use. They joined virtual peer support groups where they could be authentically themselves. The results were remarkable. Participants reported feeling less isolated. Their emotional regulation improved. Several even sought therapy without shame after seeing peers do the same. They created Self Love Sundays, where members shared wins from their week. Many went on to mentor others facing similar struggles. What began as personal healing rippled outward, inspiring local organizations to launch culturally relevant wellness workshops for Black youth across their city. This is the power of what Sabrina Northern teaches. When we heal ourselves, we create possibility for others. Or take another powerful example that beautifully illustrates Sabrina's philosophy. A cohort of mid career Black women entrepreneurs engaged in life coaching focused on building self esteem amidst workplace microaggressions. These were accomplished women by any standard, yet persistent imposter syndrome, fueled by systemic bias, led many to question their worthiness and leadership potential. Through coaching that centered radical self love, these women began practicing positive affirmations. They learned to set boundaries at work. They celebrated small victories, all acts of resistance in environments that often diminish their contributions. The transformation was profound. 80% reported improved confidence. 73% noted stronger decision making skills, both professionally and personally, after just 6 months. Several had previously avoided leadership roles, fearing backlash or failure, but found courage through collective encouragement. Notable milestones included promotions into executive positions and launching mentorship programs for younger women entering business fields. Their transformation shifted workplace cultures toward inclusivity while normalizing conversations about mental health at work. As Sabrina Northern often says, when you learn to love yourself fiercely, you give others permission to do the same. But perhaps the most powerful example of Sabrina's impact comes from a grassroots initiative led by young Black professionals who used storytelling events called healing circles to address community stigma around therapy. The challenges were significant. Deep rooted cultural beliefs equated seeking help with weakness. Lack of accessible services further discouraged engagement. But inspired by Sabrina Northern's framework, organizers partnered with local therapists who identified as part of the community. They offered free workshops, blending mindfulness practices with education about self worth rooted in heritage pride. What happened next was extraordinary. Attendance doubled over 3 months. Attendees increasingly sought formal counseling after witnessing vulnerability modeled by respected peers. The project secured grant funding from national advocacy groups eager to replicate its success across other cities facing similar barriers. Most importantly, it helped normalize discussions about both trauma, recovery, and joy centered living through authentic connection, a model now cited nationally for culturally competent care delivery. This is what happens when we break the silence, when we choose courage over comfort, when we prioritize healing over hiding. The first step toward mental wellness, Sabrina Northern told me, is recognizing that you deserve it. Such a simple statement, yet how many of us truly believe it? How many of us have internalized the message that our needs come last, that our pain matters less, that our healing can wait? In a world that often tells marginalized communities that their suffering is normal, expected, even deserved, claiming your right to wellness becomes a radical act. This is what makes Sabrina Northern's work so powerful. She doesn't just address symptoms, she challenges the systems that create them. The truth is, we cannot separate mental health from social context. We cannot talk about anxiety without acknowledging the very real threats many communities face daily. We cannot discuss depression without examining how certain groups are denied resources, representation, and respect. But here's what Sabrina Northern's research has shown. Even within these challenging realities, self love creates resilience, community creates healing, vulnerability creates connection. As one participant in Sabrina's program beautifully expressed, for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't have to earn the right to be well. I was born deserving peace. Let that sink in for a moment. You were born deserving peace, not after you've achieved enough, not when everyone else is taken care of, not when you've proven your worth. Right now, as you are. This is the heart of Sabrina Northern's message that self love isn't earned, it's reclaimed. It's remembering what was always true before the world taught you otherwise. So I challenge you today. What would your life look like if you treated yourself with the same compassion you offer others? What might change if you stopped seeing self care as selfish and started seeing it as sacred? What could you accomplish if you weren't constantly battling your own worth? The revolution of self love isn't just about feeling better, though that matters enormously. It's about dismantling systems that profit from our collective self doubt. It's about creating communities where vulnerability is valued, not vilified. It's about building a world where everyone, regardless of race, gender, sexuality, ability, or background, has access to the resources they need to heal. Starting today, I dare you to commit one radical act of self love. Maybe it's 5 minutes of morning affirmations. Maybe it's finally making that therapy appointment you've been putting off. Maybe it's simply saying no to something that drains you without apology. Whatever it is, do it knowing that your wellness is not a luxury, it's your birthright. Do it knowing that by healing yourself, you create ripples that touch countless others. Do it knowing that in a world that often demands your exhaustion, rest becomes resistance. Because as Sabrina Northern has shown us through her transformative work, when we love ourselves fiercely, we don't just change our own lives, we change the world. The revolution is waiting, and it begins with you.